Good evening. I guess you folks like Steve better than you like me. That's okay. Well, Chris certainly has an advantage over me. He said he knows most of you. Now, I still consider myself a youth, but as I've seen you walk in, I've seen some young faces and some younger faces. I realized that to be fair to you folks, I have to at least consider myself an older youth, because I don't know that I know almost any one of you. I may know probably an older sister or brother, maybe. But now it's getting to the point where I know your parents, so more than I know the youth. But that's okay. I am still excited to be here, even though I'm older than you are. And excited that God has seen fit to allow this weekend to happen. I know the committee has been excited about it. They put a lot of work into it, and so I want to bless them for that. And so it is with excitement that I'm here. I'd like to introduce myself further. I guess I'd like to introduce myself for who I'm not. Usually you introduce yourself for who you are. Chris already did that. But I'd like to introduce myself for who I'm not tonight, I guess. I'm not a pastor. I'm not even a very good orator. My wife's not here, but she has often accused me of speaking like a Hochstedler. And as you've seen in the program, that's my last name is Hochstedler. So I'd have thought that was fine. But what she's trying to say is that I talk a little bit how I write. And sometimes I try to write a little too fast or talk a little fast, and things just kind of flow together. And so people aren't sure where what starts and what stops. So I wish my wife would be here this evening. She could interpret for you. After almost 20 years, it'll be 20 years in November that we've been married. And so she is almost fluent in Hochstedler mumble. So, almost. Tonight, like I said, I'm not a pastor. I heard a pastor, not from here, but he was here for an ordination. He said one time at an ordination here, he said that pastors get accused of having like 3 or 4 messages, but they have just a bunch of different titles, for those 3 or 4 messages. And so, since I'm not a pastor, I don't know if I have the authority to do that or not, but I was asked tonight to speak a little bit about something that I've spoken before, that I've used before. And so I apologize to the home folks that are here, because you're going to hear some repeat. In fact, I seen tomorrow, Chris said we're speaking on purpose. We are tomorrow. We are a little bit more of what we need to do to prepare ourselves for the purpose that God has for us. And as I thought of that, I have spoken on that. I'm going to repeat some of that. And tomorrow's message or topic tomorrow, I thought that it came to me that I'm using a story in there that I said a couple years ago here in a devotional. But I knew the committee worked too hard for me to title the topics Pete and Repeat and not have anybody show up for sure. So, but I do apologize to the home folks if some of this starts getting old. I thought maybe I could say it from this side of the pulpit instead of the other side like I did before maybe, and try to change things up a little bit for you. Tonight, I would like to speak on something that I think that affects us all. It affects us all. I spoke on some of these things at a commencement speech here this spring. I was asked to be the speaker, and it was laid on my heart, and it fits right in with what they're using, and so they asked me to reuse it. Les Brown said, well, first of all, before I get too far, I'm going to kind of do two parts. As you see in the title says, Failing Forward. The first part is going to be a little different, but then we're going to get into that, failing forward. Les Brown said that most people go to the grave with their best music still in them. Someone else said that most people have died by the time they're 25 and are merely waiting to be buried until they're 65. It's been said that the greatest waste in the world today is not gas, coal, or oil, but human potential. And tonight, as we think of that, that human potential is the greatest wasted thing that we have on the earth. John Wooden, teacher and coach at UCLA, always liked to say that our potential is God's gift to us. What we do with it is our gift to God. And so it makes me wonder, why are we wasting the gift that our good Father has given us? What would cause us to do that? And I'd like to look at a story in the Bible that the greatest teacher, the greatest speaker, and storyteller of all time said. And it's found in Matthew 25, if you care to turn to it. I won't read all of it, but it's the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents, and I want to start in verse 14. It said, "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that received 2 also gained another 2. But he that received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoned with him, and so that he received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. And he also that received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he which had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strewed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine." Can we get the picture here? It was a long time ago, and the Lord had valuables, and he wanted them to be expounded on. And he called his servants together, and he said that he's preparing to go into a far country for a long ways away for a while. And we can get the picture that we're sure that he didn't say, I'm coming at a certain date, at a certain time. But he went and thought everything was taken care of. And when he came back, he realized that the one servant had done nothing. And he said, his Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gathered where I had not strewed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received my own with usury. What he was saying is you could have done something, anything. This servant had done nothing. He had went out back, dug a hole, threw the talent in there, and he buried it. And we almost get the picture like he was like, man, I'm glad he's finally back. It seems like he was telling the Lord, in his mind at least, that, why did you even give it to me? I've been worrying about this thing the whole time. I buried it so nobody knew I had it. What if somebody would have found out I had that talent? Next thing you know, they could have been expecting me to use it. And so he buried it and did nothing with it. And the servant, we know the story, had a sad ending. And tonight, that's a sad story. It's a sad story, but what has even more sorrow attached to it is that this story has been wrote hundreds of years ago. And yet there are people that are still living like this servant did. They're doing nothing. They have buried their talents. People are sure they have it somewhere, they have something, and yet they're doing nothing. Doing nothing. Tonight, we can stand and say, that is not our story. That doesn't have to be our story. Our story can have a better ending. We don't have to be like that servant. And tonight, I'd like to ask the question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. It's not a trick question. But why did the servant do what he did? What would cause us to go to our graves with our best music in us? What would cause us to waste all the potential and the gifts that God has given us? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Any? Where was that back there? Yes. Oh no, you too? Yes, no, I'm just teasing. Yes, the fear of failure. The fear of failure keeps us from living using the potential that God has given us. Yesterday, someone texted me. Yeah, he's here. Yesterday, as I was going about my day, I got a text from Brother Austin, and he wondered if I was working or studying, and I said, I'm working. And he asked if I forget what question he asked me, something about if I'm nervous or not. And I said, I don't know, or I said, not yet, but I'm sure I will be by the time it's all over with. And he texted me a verse in 2 Timothy 1:7. Says this, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and of a sound mind. And I wondered, why is fear such a large part of our life? Or maybe I'm just speaking to myself, but it seems like fear is large. It's anywhere we go, it seems like anything we do, fear is staring us in the face. And Sunday, our small group from church here was camping, and my almost said son-in-law. Can you believe that? My brother-in-law had a devotional for Sunday morning. Excuse me. I'm not good at sign language, so I better save that voice. But my brother-in-law, Daryl, had a devotional, and he talked about a young man at work. He talked about a young man at work, and he said, this guy is so challenging to me because this guy he's so trusting. He's just so trusting. And my brother-in-law is a world-class chef. He really is. And he will fix anything. It doesn't matter if it's underwater, over water, in the air, underground, above ground, in the tree. He'll catch it, fix it, find a way to fix it. And then he'll try to convince you that, just try it. It's very similar to chicken. Just go ahead. And I look at it and I'm like, how deep did you dig to get that? It's got sand in it. It looks gritty. But he said this young man, he's just so trusting. And when Daryl says, he works with Daryl at the restaurant, and he'll look, he don't know if he could ever eat that. And Daryl will say, sure, yeah, go ahead, just eat it. It's good. You'd like it. And the young man will say, okay, all right, I'll do it. And he'll try it. And it really just washed over me why don't we trust like that? Why do we have the fear that we do? Why do we have fear? Especially from our Heavenly Father. I could understand it, towards my brother-in-law. But why do we have fear in our lives that we would waste the potential that God gave us, that we would waste the talents that God has given us? It's like we're sitting around waiting. Well, if he gives us another talent, maybe if he gives us one more why then I'll do something with the one I got. I'd like to look at, like the young lady said here, fear of failure. Fear of failure. I'd like to look at the word fear. See what the word fear spells. Fear, if you spell it out, fear spells false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. And so fear is dishonesty. Like the verse we shared, it doesn't come from God. That fear, the fear that we're talking about, doesn't come from God. It reminds me of a story of a nice young man that he would walk to and from school. I believe he was in high school, and he would walk to and from school, and everything was fine. But one day, the neighborhood was blessed with a new family moving in, and believe it or not, they were nice enough to bring a bulldog with them. Now, this bulldog wasn't as nice as the rest of the family, and he had a bad habit. He would like to hide behind something, wait till an unsuspecting person comes walking down the sidewalk, and here he would come, just busting out, barking and carrying on, and would chase him. And so this young man would have to run the rest of the way to school or the rest of the way home. This went on for quite some time. Finally, he said, I have had it. I'm not running anymore. I'm done. No more. He was tired. He said, the next time that dog chases me, I'm going to stop, grab a stick, a brick or something. I'm going to smack him upside the head and teach him that it's not nice to chase young men. And so the next day, or a day or two later, he's walking down the sidewalk. All of a sudden, here comes this bulldog, barking, carrying on, chasing him down the sidewalk. He takes off running. You know, bad habits die hard. And all of a sudden, he reached down and he picked up something. He whirled around to teach this bulldog a lesson. And as the bulldog drew up with his mouth open barking, all at once this young man realized that the bulldog had no teeth in his mouth or anywhere else, I'm sure. And he's like, ah! Now he was really frustrated. He had been running from a toothless bulldog. So he started chasing the dog. Said, get on up out of here and don't ever chase me again. Tonight I wonder, what are you running from? What are you running from? How do we overcome fear? Do we overcome fear from running from it? You know, last night I was sitting with my neighbor. I was supposed to be home studying, but I seen my neighbor's garage door was open, so I went over to talk to him. And we've solved a lot of problems in his garage. And so I was sitting there talking to him, and he knew I was going to be speaking tonight. And we were speaking about facing fears, running from them. And I asked him, I said, you know, I wonder just how far it is to Tarsus from here. And I was wondering if he was wanting to go along. But then I looked it up later, and I think it's 5,775 miles or something. So not going to run that far. But we run from things. We run from things even less fearful than a bulldog that has no teeth. And we run from them. And we know that we shouldn't. And the longer we run, I mean, first we turn our back to it and we say, well, we're just going to ignore it. You know, it's not that bad. But then all of a sudden when we have our back to it, we're not facing it. We're like, you know what? That just, you know, that really could be something. You know, that could be something real bad. And so we start running. And pretty soon the next thing we know, we're pretty sure it's catching up to us. So we run some more, and we run faster. And the more we run, the bigger the obstacle appears. And we're just sure that now that bulldog has grown into, I don't know, a bigger dog or a bigger horse or something that's really going to get us, and we've got to run. And so fear of failure keeps us from making decisions. And we can see in this story that it kept him from using his talent. It says that the Lord went to a far city. Didn't say when he was coming back. But if we go back to the beginning of the story, there was 2 other servants, wasn't there? 2 servants that received talents. When the Lord left, what did they do? They didn't know when the Lord was returning any more than the other one did. But they acted like it was imminent. They started right away. They started right away. And the servant, the slothful servant, he went about his business like it didn't matter. Like it absolutely didn't matter. This story has become a lot more real to me. I believe it's about 4 years ago that Shannon lost her brother. Mark Tristanstall suddenly passed away. And as I stood there at that casket at a big, strong young man that just how many of you think that Tris knew that was his last day? Did he know when the Lord was returning from the far city? Do we know that? Do we know that? No, we don't. But does it matter if we're living like it is? If we're living like it is our last day. You know, a saying, there was a popular saying a few years ago. It came around that they said, live today like it's the first day of the rest of your life. Live it like it's the first day of the rest of your life. But I think there's a flaw in that. If I think of it, the first day of the rest of my life, now that sounds like I got a good bit of time left, doesn't it? You know, the first day. You know, I think we would do well if we lived it like it's our last day, not the first day. Because we don't know when the Lord's going to come, when the Lord's going to return to ask us, what have you been doing with that talents? And it's not going to help to say, well, Lord, I was going to get started tomorrow. Tomorrow, I was going to get started. Do you know that tomorrow doesn't come? If you think it does, I invite you to go to the gas station that has a sign up that says free gas tomorrow. And I would invite you, to please, just so we could do a little test, to go there every day, and report back for a month. And report back and let me know how many gallons of gasoline, free gallons of gasoline, that you received. Tomorrow never comes. It's today, isn't it? What we have is today. So how do we overcome fear? How do we keep fear from ruling our life? I don't think it works too well to run from it. You could ask the young man that was chased by the bulldog, or Jonah. But I don't believe that it works too well. But fear keeps us from making decisions. Fear keeps us from doing things, even though we know we should be doing them. And I think we're afraid of making what? We're afraid of making wrong decisions. We're afraid of looking bad. And so we could say part of it is pride, that we don't want to look bad. And we're not used to failing. Failure it's not a real pleasant word, is it? It just doesn't seem to be. And so we allow it to keep us from making decisions. And so we become more concerned about making a wrong decision than making a decision at all. I think the only way that we can overcome failure, or the fear of failure, is to do it more often. And so, and I'm living proof that failure doesn't kill you. Now, I know you may say, well, Paul, If failing would make us look like you, we don't want to have any part of it. I mean, look at the gray hair and the wrinkles. And I feel your pain there. I don't want to look like me. I know you don't. So, but you're starting from a lot better place than I started. So, but I think the only way we can overcome it is to fail, is to allow failure into our lives. We're not going to make it out of this world without failing, unless we do nothing. Winston Churchill said, courage is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. Now I'm here to ask you tonight, who wants to really build a pile of courage? I mean, really build it up. That's what he said. Courage is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. I have a book here titled For Your Glory. It was written by Trish's sister, Shannon. She compiled a bunch of writings into a book and called it For Your Glory. I'll go into a little more detail later. But there's a page titled Courage, and it has the definition of courage under it. Courage, the ability to do something that frightens one. Strength in the face of pain or grief. I'm not going to read it all, but then it says, it is steady and resolved, facing fear, but keeping on. It is a still, quiet voice whispering encouragement in the darkest moments. And so, I think we need to realize that we'll never work through fear of failure unless we're willing to fail, regardless of how it may look, regardless of what others may think. You'll get people that criticize you and say, you should have known better. Meanwhile, they sit there and do nothing. So unless we face fear, I believe it is impossible to fail forward. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about tonight. Failing forward. When I first heard that term a few years ago, I thought, well, I have no interest in going forward then, if I got to fail my way there. But that's what it is you have to fail. If failure is simply showing you what you don't know. And we all have to admit there's a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know everything. We're not going to conquer something the first time we try it. If we do, we need to start trying bigger things. Thomas Edison was asked what it feels like to fail 1,000 times. And he said he don't know. He said he simply found 1,000 ways on how not to make a light bulb. And so Edison realized that it was like a 1,000-step experiment to make the light bulb. That he wasn't failing in the sense that he wasn't going anywhere. He was failing forward. He was realizing that every step he was learning on how not to do it, and he was using that as a step. See, some people look at failure as tombstones. Edison saw it as stepping stones. And so he realized that there's something here. I'm learning. And he looked at it as a 1,000-step experiment. And finally, the light bulb came on. And I want to go back and say another story about Thomas, about how failure can turn us into a different person. In a book called A Grace Disguised, author Jerry Sitter said, we cannot change a situation, but we can allow the situation to change us. And I think that is very, very needful that we see that we can't change the situation. The situation wasn't there to be changed. We need to change. It's there to change us. Failure brings adversity. How many of you like adversity? I mean, really like some adversity. But I believe failure brings adversity. What does adversity do? Resilience comes from adversity. Adversity produces maturity. And so we need to be willing to embrace adversity. Failures bring things into our lives that we have to work through. We have to work through. And in order to fail forward, we have to change our perception of that. We have to change our perception of that we don't look at it as a failure, that we're a failure. We need to look at it as failure is an event. It's not a person. It's not who we are. Just because we don't conquer something the first time doesn't make us a failure. And adversity produces a different person. Thomas Edison, at 67 years old, lost most of his buildings in a big fire. If you remember the story, there was a spontaneous combustion, and there was firefighters from several counties came around, but it was, with all the toxic things that were in there, it went into flames. Charles, Thomas's son, quick ran to try to find his father. Couldn't find his father. And here, 67-year-old Thomas Edison was standing there, just calmly watching the fire. His white hair was billowing in the wind. And he looked around and he said, "Charles," he said, "run, get your mother. Tell her to gather her friends." He said, "They'll never see a fire like this in their lifetime again." And Charles protested, and Thomas said no. He said, "It's okay." He said, "Just think of all the rubbish we got rid of." And he said, "All the mistakes." He said, "All of our mistakes have been burned up." And what I want to bring out in that story is that the adversity, the things that he worked through, the trials that he had, the failures that he went through to produce a light bulb, 1,000-step experiment, 1,000 failures, as it were, produced in him a different man. And that's what God is trying to do with us, I believe, is allowing that adversity to make us into a person that we are not now. And so in order to fail forward, we need to face the mistakes that we've made. We do need to take responsibility. We need to say, "Yeah, that was us. We tried our best, but we didn't make it. But yeah, I'll take responsibility for that." We can't allow the past to hold us hostage. Someone said that we overestimate. Now let me get this straight. We over-exaggerate yesterday, overestimate tomorrow, and sadly underestimate today. And like I said before, we don't have tomorrow. And how many of you can go back and fix what we did yesterday? If you can fix your mistakes from yesterday, I'd be glad to pay you to fix a few of mine. But we don't. And so sadly, we underestimate today, the only day that we have. The only day that we have. And we underestimate it. And we say, well, hey, we do like that. The servant, we're like, we'll bear it and we'll wait. Maybe when we get another degree, maybe, I'll get a little smarter. Maybe God will bless me with another talent. And besides all that, yesterday, I did have a pretty good day yesterday. I really got something done. And so, in fact, it was almost 2 days worth of work. And so I'm allowed to just coast today. And besides all that, tomorrow, I am really going to bust it tomorrow. You wait till tomorrow. I'm going to catch them people that started way before I did. I'm going to pass them up. And so we convince ourselves in that, and we get caught in that state of mind because we're afraid of what we're facing today. And so we need to make peace with our past, the past mistakes we've made. It was okay to fail, even though somebody may have criticized you for it. It's okay. Make peace with that. Zig Ziglar often said, about how people just criticize. there's people that just love to criticize. And he said, but don't take it so hard. He said, as far as anyone can tell, there has never been a monument erected to a critic. And so they really aren't held in that high regard. And so don't worry if people criticize you. Realize that God has a plan for your life that you can, and it's a process. It's not a test where you failed and now it's all over. It's a process. Zig Ziglar also said, if I can find it through my notes here, we realize that there are times that, that's why the Bible says we shouldn't compare ourselves. How many of you have already compared yourself to others? Or you try to be better than others? And that's where we need to realize that God had given us all different talents, that we have different talents, that we're only responsible to be the best that we can be. That's in our control. We have to be the best that we can be. We have to give it everything we have in order to fail forward. There was speaking of giving it everything we have, it reminds me of a story that brings out adversity pretty clear. But Bear Bryant of the Alabama Crimson Tide was coaching in the game, and they were nursing a narrow lead. I can't remember who the opposing team was, but he signaled in a play, a very, very conservative play. And his quarterback went into the huddle and he said, hey, coach is calling a conservative play, but he said, that's what the other team is expecting. And he drew up a pass play. He drew up a pass play, and they run the play. He threw the ball. The other team's cornerback was a champion sprinter. He cut in, intercepted the ball, and took off for the end zone for a sure touchdown. But miracle of all miracles, the Alabama quarterback run him down and tackled him just short of the end zone and saved the game for him. Later, the opposing coach went to Bear Bryant. He said, hey, what's this nonsense about your quarterback not being a runner? Because he was not a runner. He was not known to be a runner. And Bryant said, well, that's easy. He said, it's very simple. He said, your cornerback was only running for a touchdown, but our quarterback was running for his life. And so when we face adversity, we have to give it everything we have. Our life does depend on it. It does depend on it. We need to give everything. And so he could have just said, look at that. I'm such a clown. You're supposed to run a conservative play. Here, I went way above my skis again. No, he didn't. He didn't waste no time. He took off running. He was facing adversity, and he was running towards adversity. He wasn't running the other direction, like some might, the opposite direction of the coach. But tonight, I think going into tomorrow's, in our purpose, we need to realize that God has a plan for us, that God has created us for a certain purpose. And it reminds me of a story that I have said it here before, but as long as you keep asking me to speak, I guess I'll be the judge of what stories I tell or not. So anyways, but there was a story of an old Kansas farmer, and he had an old milk cow he wanted to sell. And so he put up a notice for the cow, and a potential buyer came. And this buyer came and he looked at the cow and he said, I have 3 questions. He said, I'd like to know what the pedigree is. He said, I'd also like to know what the butterfat production is and the monthly milk production. Now, this was an old Kansas farmer. Has anybody heard from Kansas? Don't think so. Okay, so I can really pour it on. Anyways, this old Kansas farmer said, sir, he said, I have no idea what a pedigree is. Furthermore, I don't know anything about butterfat production. And he said, but sir, I can assure you that this is a good cow, and she'll give you all the milk that she has. And that's, I think, a good example of us. Of we can't say, well, until I know what my pedigree is, or hey, that cow over there's got a better pedigree than I do. I'm just gonna not give any milk. I'm just gonna bury what I got, because God has given us enough that we can be influential in His kingdom. Zig Ziglar said it this way. He said, you are highly favored with God. He said, man was designed for accomplishment, was engineered for success. Man is endowed with the seeds of greatness. That's you. That's you. If you stop and think about it, that there was never before was there Trenton, or Preston, I'm sorry, not Trenton, but never before and never again. And I believe God is saying that you are enough. He's saying if you take everything you got and you give it everything you have, you're enough. You have enough. And God is asking you to trust in that. God is asking you not to hold anything back. You know, if we think about Trish's life story, I still wear a wristband to remind myself, because as I stood there at that casket, I vowed to myself that I would remember that. If Trish can be called right then, we can too. We can't say we're going to do it tomorrow. That's being presumptuous, that we have more time. All we have is today, and all we have is what we got right now. And we need to give it everything we have. And God will bless us with more, as we've seen in the story of the talents. That as they worked, that their labor was increased and that it was blessed. Tonight, I just want to remind you that you are someone special, that you do, that God has, that you are favored. You are favored with God. And tomorrow we're going to talk about that. God's purpose for you. Seeking purpose. And so I would just ask that you pray tonight, that you would open yourselves to what God has for us. I don't even know what all it is, but I do ask for your prayers and just want to pray with you. Tonight, I in my introduction, I did finish. See how, I was saying earlier that I talk too fast sometimes, talk faster than I think. Some people say they have the gift of gab. I'm not sure how much a gift it is, because they say when you open your mouth, the world knows who you are. And sometimes mine opens without my permission, and people find out who I am. But tonight, one thing I wanted to say that I wanted to introduce myself as is a friend. I want to introduce myself as your friend. And I know that I don't know most of you, but I still think that as a child of God, the work that has been done in our lives, that we can do that there's a love that we have for even those that we don't know. And I know there's a lot of different types of friends, different forms of friends, but I'm thinking of a friend that walks with you, that wants to learn with you. And so that's what I'm excited about this weekend that we can learn together. None of us have it all, but they say, all together we know so much more than we do by ourselves. I like John Maxwell often said, that he often said, some of my best thinking has been done by others. And so I think that could be said of all of us. So tonight, and this weekend, I really do look forward to learning with you, to walk with you as a friend that wants to help, a friend that's concerned. When Chris asked me if I would speak this weekend, I didn't hesitate because I thought of it this way. This very likely could be the only opportunity we'll ever have to spend together. This may be my only opportunity to share with you. And so if there's something if there's something I could do, however small, I want to be willing to do it. I often say that youth are a passion of mine. I love youth. I love to be around here, and I was reminded again tonight of the singing. I'm like, wow, it just reminded me again. That's why I like to be around youth. Just the excitement and just the singing, unbelievable. And so I was just encouraged by that, and encouraged that there's each of you here that are looking to live for God, looking to live your life God's way. And so I just want to bless you for that, and again, just ask permission to walk with you and learn this weekend.